Alexander Hamilton wrote in Federalist 70, the ingredients which constitute energy in the executive are unity, duration, and adequate provision for its support, and competent powers. The framers of the Constitution allowed the President to have competent powers by vaguely defining the authority of the executive branch in Article 2, Section 1, Clause 1 of the Constitution.
The fear of having a tyrannical president was diminished by a system of checks and balances and the precedent set forth by George Washington. After the farewell address of George Washington, the model of a limited and active president began to erode. John Adams implemented the Alien and Sedition Acts to quell domestic protests and give the executive power to deport foreigners.
Thomas Jefferson was faced to interpret the powers of the executive branch in the constitutionality of the Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson expanded the interpretation of the vague powers granted to the executive branch and made the executive decision to accept the Louisiana Purchase, challenging the bounds of executive power.
Andrew Jackson set the course of presidential power expansion and used his veto power 12 times during his presidency, more than all 6 of the prior presidents combined. Jackson abused the veto power to destroy the Second Bank of the United States in order to serve his economic policies.
During the Civil War, President Abraham Lincoln suspended writ of habeas corpus and violated Article 1, Section 9 of the Constitution. Lincoln independently raised the naval blockade against southern ports, overstepping the framers' original intentions of competent powers. Lyndon B. Johnson enlarged the powers of the executive branch and weakened the legislative branch through the Gulf-Tonkin Resolution. This resolution allowed Johnson the ability to pursue and escalate the conflict in Vietnam without congressional approval or a declaration of war. Since then, the legislative branch has failed to adequately check the powers of the executive branch.
President George Bush used the Military Commissions Act of 2006 to expand the power of his administration by allowing him the ability to declare American and non-American citizens as enemy combatants. President Bush extended his power and suspended writ of habeas corpus and held enemy combatants in Guantanamo Bay for a limited time of imprisonment.
The judicial branch has effectively checked the power of the executive branch with their rulings against the Military Commissions Act. In Boumediene v. Bush and Al-Odoa v. United States, the Supreme Court challenged the legality of the imprisonment of the prisoners and the constitutionality of the act.
Presidential power is greatly expanded and influenced by the media because media outlets provide readily available information to the people on request. Televised broadcasting, newspapers, etc. have given the presidents the opportunity to reach out to the public and increase their influence over the American public.
President Franklin Roosevelt broadcasted fireside chats, presenting him an individual spotlight in the public to convey his plans on the New Deal. These fireside chats rallied massive support from the citizens, voters, and public and spilled over to the Congress, leading to the passing of many New Deal programs.
John F. Kennedy's speech pertaining to the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962 is considered a historic representation of U.S. presidents using the media to win over public support and increase presidential power. President Kennedy was able to effectively broadcast a powerful speech through public media outlets warning the USSR that a full strike would result if missiles were launched in the Western Hemisphere.
Massachusetts Senator Daniel Webster once said, "The contest for ages has been to rescue liberty from the grasp of executive power. A powerful executive has controlled other branches, redistributing the balances of powers, and has created a tyrannical president left unchecked. The framers' original intentions of a living president has evolved into an overpowering executive branch." Thank you.
Congress check the president.
Congress does check the president. Congress checks the president by the Wars Power Resolution. Even though it's a resolution and does not have any affirmative action that can take place if the president breaks it, it can still check the president by having the people wanting to.
On the contrary of what Clark says, I actually disagree. I don't think Congress effectively checks the president. I think the most effective check within our republic or representative form of democracy would be the people themselves to check the president.
How?
Well, so in order for the people to actively voice their concern to check the president would be through the representative. But the only problem we see now is that the people aren't actively voicing their concerns through the representatives, and the representatives themselves are falling into political parties by not actively expressing or their constituents' interests.
I disagree with Henry. I believe also
Stop talking. Any other two have anything to say?
I agree with Henry. The relationship between citizen participation and their representatives is definitely at fault, and that relationship would need to be rekindled in order to check the president because Congress does not have all the power to check the president.
What about the government shutdown? Isn't that a check on the president? How'd that work?
Well, the government shutdown is actually enforcing my idea of political parties. Because you have a disagreement that's occurring because no one is refusing to compromise, then the interests of the people aren't being served. So it enhances this idea that
Percentages show that people don't understand the Affordable Care Act, so wasn't Congress just doing what the people wanted?
But
By putting the Affordable Care Act on the spotlight, because that, as a check against presidential authority and enforcing a law that the people might not necessarily agree with?
the president isn't enforcing law, it's all the Congress
The
enforcing
president's
law.
not enforcing laws?
Because Congress has to pass the law first.
They passed it. Affordable Care Act's in operation. Isn't that what the government shutdown was about?
Past 3 years ago.
Supreme Court upheld it as well. So isn't that exactly what you just said? Isn't that what Congress did? How does Congress check the president?
Congress checks the president by passing his agenda and also not blocking his agenda that he proposes to Congress.
Any questions?
Say that again.
Congress checks the president by passing the legislation that he proposes, like his agenda, or blocking his agenda that he proposes, such as the Affordable Care Act.
Good.
So in what areas right now today is it felt that the president is abusing his rights and privileges as the president?
Emily.
Syria,
How?
because the people voted, I think, 60% that the people didn't want to go to war with Syria, but the president is thinking that he should because it serves the common good. So there could be a question there that the president is abusing his power to go to war, even though the people didn't want to.
I disagree with Emily on that because even though he wanted to go to war, he still asked Congress if they were in favor of it. And they decided that they did not want to go to war. That is why we do not have any action against Syria currently.
Okay, but at one point in time, he wasn't gonna go to Congress.
At one point he wasn't, but he still did.
Okay. Anything else?
You guys have no current examples of the testimony. None. Zero. And hence the reason why I think both of us are absolutely hounding you on it, because there's none there. What about the NSA? What about the use of the NSA, which by the way is the president because it's the executive branch. Anything that has any acronym is the president, because he's the one who enforces it. Whether he likes it or not, it falls under him. The IRS scrutinizing Tea Party groups falls under the president.